She cornered me in the school parking lot, in front of every parent, every teacher, every kid spilling out the front doors, and called me a classist snob who was destroying her daughter's social life. And I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because she had no idea what I had seen on her front doorstep 3 weeks earlier. And she had absolutely no idea what every other parent at that school was about to find out. My name isn't important. What matters is that I'm a mother. And on an ordinary afternoon in February, I dropped my 13-year-old daughter off for a sleepover, routine, unremarkable, the kind of thing you don't even think twice about, and walked away with a feeling I had never experienced before in my life. The kind of feeling that doesn't need evidence. The kind that sits in your stomach and screams at you until you listen. I listened. And by the time the dust settled, an entire school community had heard what I heard, seen what I saw, and decided for themselves what to do with that information. This is a story about instinct, about what happens when you trust it, and about the kind of karma that arrives quietly, not with a bang, but with the slow, inevitable weight of the truth. Let me take you back to where this started. Our home has always been what people in the parenting world call the house. If you have teenagers, you know exactly what I mean. It's the one with a permanently stocked pantry, a revolving door of backpacks, and a rule so simple it works. Don't be loud, don't bother the adults, help yourself to snacks. My daughter Alina, 13, gentle, the kind of kid who remembers everyone's birthday, had built her whole social world inside our four walls. She hosted sleepovers, movie nights, spontaneous hangouts on Tuesday afternoons. She was never really the one to go elsewhere. Our house was just the place. So when her new friend Kennedy, a girl who'd transferred to the school that year, whose mom worked in the school office, asked if Alina could sleep over the night before a family party, it felt like something sweet. A rite of passage. Alina, finally going to someone else's house for once. Kennedy's mom had come by for pickups a handful of times. She was warm, professional, perfectly pleasant. I had no reason to think anything was wrong. I said yes without a second thought. I loaded Alina's overnight bag into the car. She forgot her phone charger. I reminded her. We drove across town. And for the entirety of that drive, my world was exactly as ordinary as it had always been. We pulled up to Kennedy's house and I reached for Alina's bag in the back seat. Normal, routine. And then the front door opened, and it wasn't Kennedy's mom. It was her stepdad. I want to be careful here, because I've spent weeks turning this over in my mind, trying to figure out how to explain what happened in those first few seconds. I am not someone who makes snap judgments. I've been around enough different kinds of people to know that first impressions can mislead you. But what I felt when that door opened was not an impression. It wasn't even a thought, really. It was physical. My stomach dropped. A cold, immediate unease settled into me that I could not locate or explain, only feel. I smiled. I introduced myself. I told Alina to go find Kennedy. And I stayed on that porch, making small talk, because something in me needed to get a better read on this man before I drove away and left my daughter there. I've asked myself many times since whether I was right to stay, whether I should have just taken Alina and left, and honestly, maybe, but I stayed, I watched, and within 5 minutes I had everything I needed, everything and more than I wanted. Within 2 minutes of standing on that porch, I had a list forming in my head that I couldn't stop adding to. He opened an alcoholic drink, not by itself a crime. But he was the adult supervising a group of 13-year-old girls, and it was the afternoon. He told me with a smile in front of Alina that he didn't believe I was old enough to have a teenage daughter. That comment I might have brushed off, except he didn't just say it once. He said it twice, and in between those 2 times, he asked me twice how old Alina was, and then he said how much we looked alike. My daughter and I, how similar we were, and when he said it, he wasn't looking at me. Ask yourself, when someone pays you a compliment and looks at your child while doing it, what does that feel like? Because I can tell you what it felt like to me. It felt like a warning. Then Kennedy came into the hallway. She was wearing shorts in her own home, on a warm afternoon, and he stopped the conversation entirely to demand she go change. Not ask, demand, loudly, in front of a stranger, in front of me. Every single alarm in my body was ringing. I kept smiling. I kept talking. And the moment Kennedy's mom pulled up in the driveway, I said my goodbyes and I left. I called my husband from the car. My hands were steadier than I expected them to be. I told him everything, the comments, the drink, the way he'd looked at Alina, the thing with Kennedy's shorts. And then I said something I have never said in 13 years of raising my daughter. She is not spending the night there. We made an excuse, a forgotten obligation, something that came up. My husband drove back to pick Alina up before dinner, before the night truly settled in. Alina didn't spend the night. She didn't get to go to the party the next day. She was disappointed, how could she not be? But she didn't make a scene. She is, as I mentioned, an extraordinary kid, and I want to be honest with you because I think honesty matters in a story like this. I had no proof, no incident, no history I could point to. Just a gut feeling and a list of things that didn't add up. I knew that. I sat with that discomfort. I told myself I might be wrong. I genuinely hoped I was wrong, but here's the thing about a mother's instinct. It doesn't negotiate with you. It doesn't wait for evidence. It just knows, and it had been talking to me since the moment that door opened. I was not wrong. Life went on. Weeks passed. Alina and Kennedy stayed friends, they texted, they talked at school, nothing dramatic played out between the girls. I was grateful for that. I just quietly let the situation become what it was, Alina's friend who didn't come over as much anymore. No confrontation, no announcement, just a gentle fade. And then I ran into Amy at school pickup. Amy is the kind of friendship that lives in parking lots, warm, real, not quite crossed the threshold into your actual life yet. We were chatting the way you do when the bells just rung and you're waiting, and she mentioned she hadn't seen Alina at the party at Kennedy's house the Sunday after the sleepover. She'd been there with her own daughter. She'd noticed Alina's absence. She asked if everything was okay. Now, here is the question I've turned over more than any other in this whole story. Should I have said nothing? Should I have smiled and said Alina just had a conflict that day? Maybe. I honestly don't know. What I know is that Amy was a mother asking me a genuine question, and I gave her a genuine answer. I told her the truth, not as a warning, not as a verdict, just as the truth. The stepdad made me uncomfortable. Here's what he said and did. You can do with that what you think is right. She thanked me, said she understood, and I thought that was the end of it. A week later, Kennedy's mom, Sarah, walked out of that school with purpose. And I mean purpose. The kind of walk you develop when you have rehearsed something, when you have been sitting with anger long enough to give it direction. She came straight to me. She told me that another mother had started keeping her daughter away from the house because of, and I'm quoting here, males in the house without the mother present. She knew it came back to me. She accused me of lying when we made our excuse to pick Alina up early. She said I was a snob. That Kennedy was at the school on free tuition because her mom worked there, and that I was judging their family based on their finances, their neighborhood, their circumstances. None of that was true, not one word of it. But I was standing in a public parking lot with children all around me. And the actual truth, your husband made me feel like my daughter was not safe, is not a sentence you say to a woman you've met 3 times in front of an audience when she's already looking for a fight. So I stood there, and I absorbed it. And I let her think the worst of me, because the worst of me was still better than the conversation we would have had if I'd told her the real reason. She walked away furious, and I drove home knowing something she didn't. I wasn't the only one. Here's what Sarah didn't know. Here's what I barely knew myself. Amy hadn't asked me about the sleepover out of casual curiosity. She'd had her own experience. At the party the following Sunday, the one Alina hadn't attended, Amy had been picking her daughter up when Sarah stepped out back. Through the kitchen window, Amy had caught a glimpse of the stepdad. He was talking to one of the teenage cousins at the party. Just talking, but his body language had stopped her cold. Something about the way he positioned himself. The way the girl angled away. Later, Amy's daughter told her that Kennedy's own step-siblings and cousins had a word for him. They called him a weirdo. They said he made inappropriate jokes, that he demanded hugs, demanded physical affection from the kids, from his stepchildren, from their friends, from their cousins at family parties. 2 mothers, the same man. Neither of us had compared notes. Neither of us had suggested anything to the other before we each came to our own conclusion independently. We had both just known. Remember when I said I wasn't the only one? Amy had felt exactly what I had felt. And now she was asking me if I'd be willing to put what I had seen in writing, just the facts, just the observable moments, and share them with a parent group chat she was putting together. I thought about it for a long time, because I understood what it meant. And then I said yes. I sat at my kitchen table and I typed out exactly what I had seen, not what I suspected, not what I feared, just the facts in order as they happened. The drink, the comments, the way he asked me twice how old Alina was, the way he looked at her when he said we looked alike. The demand that Kennedy change out of her shorts in her own home, no embellishment, no verdict, just the truth offered to other parents who could decide for themselves. The response was immediate. Every parent in that group thanked us, every single one. Not one person questioned our motives. Not one person accused us of gossip or overreach. because every parent in that group understood exactly what we were doing and exactly why, because they would have done the same thing. Because that is what parents do. We protect each other's kids when we can. There was no drama, no pylon, no public shaming. Just information, shared quietly between people who needed it. And then everyone went home. I'd spent weeks being afraid that speaking up made me the villain, that I'd started something ugly and unnecessary based on nothing but a feeling. And sitting in that kitchen, reading those responses, I understood something I think I'd known all along but needed to hear reflected back at me. A mother's instinct is not gossip. It is not cruelty. It is not overreach. It is the oldest protection system in the world. And it works. I texted Sarah. I always text when something matters. I wanted a record of what was said. I told her plainly. It had nothing to do with where she lived or what Kennedy's tuition situation was. Her husband's behavior at that front door had made me uneasy about leaving my daughter there. That was the whole truth. I told her I understood if she disagreed with my read on the situation. I told her Kennedy was welcome in our home anytime, that she was a lovely girl, and that none of this was her fault. Sarah responded that Kennedy wouldn't be coming over anymore. She wasn't comfortable with her daughter in my care. I told her I hoped she'd change her mind, and I left it there because I understood. I genuinely did. If someone had said the same thing to me about my husband, I'd probably feel the same pull. The difference is, my husband doesn't behave like hers. Kennedy and Alina are still friends, still texting, still looking out for each other at school. Alina's friend group had a sleepover not long ago. Apparently 13-year-old girls are deeply into car racing now, which I did not see coming, and Kennedy couldn't come. So Alina made her a party favor bag and brought it to school Monday morning so Kennedy could feel like she'd been part of it. My daughter has more grace than most adults I know. I am so proud of her it aches. I still don't know if that man ever did anything wrong. My husband searched, no records, nothing on file. He might just be a chauvinist. He might just be someone who exists on the uncomfortable side of a line without ever crossing it. There is a whole spectrum of people between decent and dangerous, and I genuinely don't know where he falls. But I can sleep at night. And that matters more than I can tell you. Because in a different version of this story, a version where I talked myself out of that feeling, where I decided I was being dramatic, where I cared more about what people thought of me than about what I knew, there is a version of me living with a different question. One I would never be able to answer. One that doesn't go away. So no, I don't regret it. I don't regret the instinct, the conversation in the parking lot, the text I sent to Sarah, the message in the parent group chat. Not one piece of it, because we are all just trying to take care of our kids the best we can. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is trust yourself when everything inside you says something is wrong. Karma doesn't always arrive with a bang. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in a group chat, in a text, in the steady voice of a mother who decided the truth mattered more than being liked. If this story hit differently for you, drop a like and subscribe. We share stories of instinct, justice, and karma every single day. You know where to find us.